So, hey, welcome back to Accelerated Investor. I'm your host, Josh Cantwell. Today, I have something a little bit different for you. Today, we're going to talk about one of the easiest paths to get into real estate, and that's land investing. My guest today is a gentleman named Daniel Apke. Daniel has a full land investing firm in Cincinnati, Ohio. And he not only buys land, flips land, develops land, but Daniel's a former residential investor who did a lot of what I would call traditional investments, rehabs, wholesaling, and rentals, and ultimately decided that buying the physical land, the dirt, and flipping it or owner financing it or developing it was a much easier path for him to get started. And so today we're going to talk specifically to all of you who maybe haven't done your first deal yet, or maybe you're looking for an easy way to make some quick money. Flipping land that you can buy for $5,000 to flip for $10,000, or land that you could buy for $100,000, flip for $200,000, land that you can buy that's infill, or land out in rural areas with no tenants, no toilets, none of the stuff that I deal with from my portfolio, and also things that people are not mentally or emotionally tied to, which is their extra free land. So today we'll talk with Daniel Apke about the strategies that he uses to profit from land investing. Here we go.
Welcome to the Accelerated Investor Podcast with Josh Cantwell. If you're looking to retire early with forever passive income, you're in the right place. This podcast is the go-to destination for real estate investors, both active and passive, and multifamily apartment investors, both new, intermediate, and advanced. Now, sit back, listen, learn, and accelerate your business, your life, and your investing with the Accelerated Investor Podcast.
So, hey, Dan, listen, thanks so much for joining me today on Accelerated Investor, man. I'm excited to have you on the show. What's going on?
Hey, Josh. Yeah, appreciate you having me.
Sure, absolutely. So, Dan, as our audience gets to know you and a little bit more about your investing strategies, I would love to hear what you're up to right now, what kind of projects you're working on that you're passionate for, that kind of get you up in the morning, that get you excited. So what are some things that you're going to be working on like tomorrow, like next week, projects that you're working on to make money, and also just passion projects that you're working on?
The biggest project right now, Josh, is because land investing specifically, which is my niche, is a relatively new business model in the real estate, especially the way we're doing it. So right now we're actually developing a CRM for other land investors specifically for this. And we've been asked over and over and over again for multiple years now, can we come up with something? Because people just get stuck with, how the systems and processes are. Like people, if you don't have that kind of mindset, get kind of wrapped around that and stuck with it. They want to grow their business, but they're stuck with the processes. So for me, it's just coming up with that another ability to help create freedom for people through building them a CRM specifically for the land investing that we're working on.
Got it. Love it. And what do you make of today's market relative to not just your investing strategy with land, but just how is it impacting your clients, people that are looking up to you for advice? What do you kind of make of what's going on with interest rates? And does that even affect land investing at all?
It affects it on the sell side for land investing, but it's cool because on the acquisition side, we are seeing much more hits per mailer. So we actually send out mail to acquire most of our properties and other forms of reaching them directly. And we're seeing more hits per mail sent out. And I think that's just because when you talk about land investing specifically, this isn't someone's necessity. This isn't, shelter for them. It's not food. It's not water. This isn't something where they live. This is something that they a lot of times inherited. They've never been to the land, whatever their situation is. So they have that piece of equity under them that if they do need money with things getting tighter and potentially big recession coming, this is something they can liquidate to pay whatever, their mortgage, their car off, their kids' tuition when things do get tight, because money is getting tighter. We all know that. So this is just another way. So we see on the acquisition side, it's getting a lot easier to acquire. On the sell side, we see things just really slowing down. Not a crazy amount yet to get overly concerned about, but we're being much more cautious on acquisition side just because there's less buyers in the market. Money is getting more expensive. So that's in the land investing side of things. But overall, I'm pretty optimistic. I think when things go down like this, it creates a lot of different opportunities within the next 6 to 18 months or so. I'm going to I'm starting to stockpile cash, just getting ready for acquisitions when the interest rates do affect the prices on the sell side, which is kind of trickling down. But I'm excited. I'm optimistic as an investor. I think there's a ton of opportunities coming.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think that there's people who are investing right now who are going to get in trouble because of the way they structured their deals, and they're going to need to sell. And also, whenever time there's a recession and people do have that underlying asset, whether it's an apartment building in my case, or land and somebody's own, whether it's 5 acres or 500 acres, and they think like, I could really use the money now for this. How do I get out of this to liquidate it and get liquid a little bit to get me through the tough times?
Exactly.
So I own a piece of land, right? So I own, it's not huge. It's about 2 acres. It's infill. It's in the city. And I'm going to develop 100 acres or 100 units of apartments on it.
Wow.
So I know what I'm going to do with that land. But a lot of other people that have land, not sure what they're going to do with it. So for our audience that's interested in buying land, or maybe developing land into apartments, or maybe just flipping land for income, why don't you just explain real high level, what does land investing mean, and what are some different ways to profit from it?
So for us, we really focus on the acquisition side. That drives the business. We got to find good, desirable pieces of land with no structures or anything on it, obviously under market value. It's all about the buy price, just like a lot of real estate is. But this specifically, the model that we're doing, you're not cash flowing from it, right? We're looking to sell it for a profit. You can cash flow with owner financing, leasing to farmers, depending on where your land is. There's other ways to do it that we have done. But the primary of our business is buying it under market value. And what you'll run into a lot of times is in rural America. So I know you're up in Cleveland. You go 2-3 Ashtabula County, for instance. You go to Ashtabula County, there's a lot of land out there. It's pretty rural. Try to get a real estate agent to go list your property, say it's 5-10 acres for $100,000 or $80,000, right? They have to drive from, say they live in Cleveland, they have to drive from Cleveland all the way over to Ashtabula. It's an hour and a half or whatever it is, and then drive back for a few $1,000s commission. So it's not easy to sell the properties. And that's kind of what we teach. So we teach 2 major things, which is acquiring under market value and then how to market your property. So if you're stuck with that piece of land, there is a buyer out there for any piece of land, just about. So if you're in rural America, you have to cater it to rural America. If you have an infill lot in Cleveland that you're developing, that's what you have to cater it towards. So on the infill lot side of things, we would focus that business model around finding end buyers. So finding builders in that area who want 0.2 to 0.5 acres or so in a specific county, zip code, whatever that is. So going to the builders first, finding what they want, and then going back and trying to acquire that piece. Because as the market does get tighter, like we just talked about too, having that list of buyers and that demand already in front of you, so you have a buyer before you even acquire the property, becomes more and more critical.
Got it. Love it. So really buying it below market value, flipping the land to whether it's a rural buyer, farmer, whether it's an infill builder, developer, that's the business model. How do you, Dan, help me understand, like if I was looking at this infill piece of land that I have in Lakewood, how do you even comp out land? Like how do you get a feeling for what land's worth? Because I would imagine land is really, the value is in the eye of the developer, the builder, what they're going to do with it. Somebody might be willing to pay a lot more if they're building a high-rise apartment complex versus if somebody's going to do a retail strip center that might be just be 1 floor. So help me understand, how do we evaluate and determine how to buy something below market value?
For your situation where you have a very desirable, where you're building a infill lot, multifamily in a desirable area, that gets a little bit trickier because the estimated cost is going on your buyer who has that vision for that piece of land. So that is much, much harder to comp. But that's why this business model is so sustainable. Land is very hard to comp out because you go to Ashtabula County, look for anything from 2 to 50 acres or 2 to 100 acres. See how many, and there might be some, but see how many comps there are in the last 12 months that sold. It's not like houses where you can type in 45212 and have 10 3 bed, 2 bath, 1,500 square foot places within a quarter of a mile. Land is tough. They might be, your closest comp might be 20 miles away. A lot of it just becomes, you have to be able to sort good comps. I always tell people I'd rather take 2 to 3 very, very good comps rather than 15, 20 bad comps. Because what happens in rural America and with land prices, some people owner finance. So the comp report pulls up wrong and it's incorrect, or you have neighbors just acquiring it from them for cheap. So there's a ton of bad comps with land, just like there is with houses too, really. But it's about finding those good comps that match what your average land is going to look at. Because at the end of the day, if we send 10,000 mailers, there's going to be some with a lake on it, maybe lakefront in Ashtabula County. There's going to be, but we got to look for the average piece of land. And that's what we need to price based off of. And then when they call to negotiate and things like that, we have to dive in a little bit deeper. But it's, to answer your question, it is pretty difficult. We pull comps and we dive specifically into individual comps and really, really analyze how long they were on the market, when they went for sale, when they sold, what was the marketing like? Is it on a lake? Is it not on a lake? What area is it in? And different things like that.
Got it. I got it. I love it. Now, what about owning land for cash flow? What about acquiring land, maybe using a private investor, acquire the land using private money, wrapping it, selling it to someone on owner financing, cash flowing it, that type of thing. And if the guy defaults, then you get to take the land back and do it all over again.
Yeah, that opens up the door, especially as markets and banks get tighter on these things. For the last, land in general historically has been pretty hard to find a bank to finance for the last few years. But as we get more and more into this, I think owner financing is going to get bigger as banks get tighter and tighter with financing land, because historically it's not that easy to finance land in general. So that's another way to sell. It becomes more important to find ways to sell in tighter markets. So owner financing is something we definitely believe in. The last 2 years, we haven't needed to as much just because people are paying such a premium and we're selling things so fast. But no, I'm definitely for owner financing. As things get tighter, we're doing that more and more now, because like you said, say we buy land for $10,000 and we could list it for $25,000 and sell it right now. We can get a down payment maybe for $6,000, $7,000, then do a 5-6 year owner financing deal with them. And then if they default on it, we get that down payment plus anything, and then just do it the same thing over again. So I'm definitely for that. That's a big thing in this industry to do.
Yeah. And I would think, as the less that banks will fund and the less favorable terms, then you get more the owner financing involved. Right now, even with our apartment buildings, somebody that might want to sell a building for 10 million, maybe a year and a half ago, they would have get 12 million or 11 million for it. People were overpaying as competitive. Now it's like, well, the cost of debt is almost prohibitive. It's 6, 7, 8% interest now, and it's going to even go higher next year. Then the seller's like, well, I can't get my price. So, well, you can get your price if you carry back some or all of the financing. That's more favorable than what the bank can give me, right? I would think that strategy would work well in a downturn of the market.
Exactly. And you might as well, like, if banks are getting tighter, why don't you just become the bank and offer that interest and capitalize on both ends and make it easier, and more people are able to buy the land now. You just open the net so much wider.
Yeah. Are you ready to automate and explode your real estate investing? We're searching for extremely motivated individuals who are sick and tired of wasting time and want to finally see real results from their real estate investing business. We're searching for investors looking to get to the next level and become a bigger, better version of themselves while being a more successful real estate investing entrepreneur. Apply for mentoring and coaching at joshcantwellcoaching.com/podcast. That's joshcantwellcoaching.com/podcast. Now I have to ask you, Dan, so I live in a pretty, I would say, regular suburban neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Bunch of big houses. Everyone's got half acre, whatever. But right behind me, right through this window, is 40 acres of land that I want.
Wow.
This lady, she's fantastic. I've talked to her many times. Husband passed away 5-7 years ago, left her the land. It's just her and her adult son lives with her. And I'm trying to get her to sell me some or all of that land, right? Because now you'd be like in an amazing, very very nice suburb where nobody has land except I want 1 acre, 5 acres, 10 acres, all 40 acres. That's right behind me, right outside this window.
Yeah.
And she seems to want to, not sure what she's going to do with it. She maybe will give it to her adult son who might do something with it. Now, I mean, he's living in his mom's basement, right? So I hope he doesn't hear this, but he's living in his mom's basement. I don't think he's going to develop it. And she was kind of told from friends or family that the land was worth gobs and gobs and gobs of money. So I'm trying to talk her off the price, and I'm just trying to get her a little bit more motivated to do something when I don't know if she's all that motivated to sell it, maybe ever. So you probably run into this situation a lot, right? Where you talk to a seller, they have land, you're like, wow, that's a great piece of land. I would love to own that, whether I keep it, whether I develop it, whether I flip it. What are some techniques and strategies maybe to talk to her and maybe create some more urgency? Maybe talk her out of, her friend 10 years ago that told her, oh my God, this is worth millions, when it's really not. To give you an idea, my buddy that lives right on the other side of this main road owns a huge apple farm. Okay. 100 acres. My old business partner, we're still close friends.
Wow.
He just acquired another 14 acres for $190,000. Okay. So what is that? 12,000, 13,000 an acre.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my comp, right? That's my comp. So 14 acres for 190 grand right over there. And then I got this land as 40 acres behind my house, and I really would like to get at least a slice of it. So that's give you some idea of some context. Where would you start? What advice would you give me? Any ideas from your experience of how to approach her or comp it out? Some just different ways to approach that type of deal.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good comp if you have one right in that area, 14 acres. Obviously, theoretically, and it's not always the case, 14 acres, price per acre should be more than 40 acres just because it's a bulk buy at that point. You're buying 4x the amount, but that's a tough situation. We run into that every single day.
I know you do.
Yeah, and she has connection with that land too, because you said her husband bought it, correct? So she has like her heart's in it too, and a lot of times they don't want to disappoint their husband, or they don't want to do him injustice by selling it too cheap or whatever that is. They're tied to that land emotionally. And that's an extremely difficult thing to come after. My number one advice for that, and it's not for your situation, when you run into situations like that, there's so many motivated people out there that do want to sell their land. For you, it's your neighboring property. So you want that specific one. So we're going to talk about that differently. But if you run into this and it's not your neighbor's property, send more mail, get more, text out there, get more potential acquisitions out there. There's plenty of motivated people. You don't necessarily need to fight too hard to find good deals out there. But for that situation, it's a negotiation thing. You got to find out. I mean, the way I would approach that is not to buy all 40. I would attack it like you said, I would start with like 5 acres or something. She'd still have 35 acres more. I'd start there. She'd still have 35 acres of her husband's old land. Her son still has plenty of land to develop on. You just want to help her out, give her a little bit of money for it, and then you get a little bit more freedom from that land as well and get some. But that's how I would probably approach that situation. But obviously there's so much that goes into negotiation, especially when people are emotionally tied.
Yeah. And if I can use the other land that my buddy bought with the apple orchard, the 14 acres, at least it gives me a starting point of a price per acre number.
Yeah.
Within a half a mile. It's literally on the other side of this other main road. And because I don't think she knows what it's worth. I think she just thinks, well, I was told a long time ago, I'd probably have a developer come in and offer me a fortune for it. And the developer would put a bunch of houses on it and I'd make a windfall. At least now I can say, well, here's a starting price. Let me just make you an offer for 5 acres. Maybe it's, 12,000 an acre, $60,000. What do you think? All cash. Here you go. And see what she says. And then, maybe it takes her a while to come off that number. Who knows? Maybe a recession.
Yeah.
Maybe she's like, hey, I could use the money. You never know when somebody's motivation comes in.
Exactly. And that's what I tell our salespeople. We have salespeople that are answering those calls all day. I just tell them, listen, give them your best offer and then follow up with them and walk. Don't get too emotionally tied to it. You never know when someone's going to get money. We had a deal just come last week. The guy called us five months ago. He wanted to sell his property. We gave him our best offer. He said he had other better offers out there. We said, all right, well, we really can't go up any more than this. He called us last week. We got it under contract just because whatever happened, who knows if he made those other offers up or if he had them or if their money might have tightened up so they couldn't buy it anymore. So he came back to us and we're acquiring that property. So I always put an offer in their hand for them to go on. That's my number one advice for you, because you never know when they're going to need that money. Her life situations change. A lot of things change in 6 months. Think of your life 6 months ago. Like, a lot has changed. And especially coming up 6 months from now with things getting tighter, get an offer in her hand so she has that in the back of her head.
Got it. And Dan, let me ask you, why for you was land so attractive versus maybe a more traditional route of real estate, like buying, rehabs or wholesaling or, building a portfolio? What was it about land that was attractive to you? And why do you think that other people should really look at land as an investment strategy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I actually, to be transparent, I started in rental real estate. I graduated college when I was in my low 20s, and I invested in a rental salon. So I owned a salon in Cincinnati, and it was a rental investment. There's an apartment above it. So that was my first ever investment that I made on a real estate side. And I love that. And then I bought a single family home, and then I house hacked, and I did all that. And I fell in love with real estate, but it was harder for me to make. And I didn't want to give up my assets and sell them and flip them necessarily. I wanted to keep them for a long-term hold. And it was harder to make a full-time living and quit my job from that. So from there, I actually started an e-commerce electric bike company, and that was able to get me out of my 9 to 5. So I was looking for ways to get me out of my 9 to 5. And I started an electric bike company that isn't related to real estate at all, just because I saw that as an easier path than actually traditional real estate methods. And I ended up selling that to an investor out in California and liquidating that company. And I got into land investing because I saw the potential it created for people that were in my situation. So teaching my past self, what would my past self at 22, 23-year-olds want to see? Land investing is, like you said, very simple. There's no toilets, no tenants, none of that stuff on it. It's very simple. You don't need much upfront capital to start. We have such a big group of investors. So these people that are joining our program and getting into land investing aren't actually investing in their own properties, right? They're investing in their marketing, which is their mail, if they're doing text messaging campaigns, things like that, and the software behind it and stuff. But then they go and they source all the funding elsewhere. And it's, like I said, it's not a necessity for people. So there are so many landowners out there. It is fairly easy to acquire under market land. So in terms of just making relatively quick and full-time income to get out of your 9 to 5 job, this is what I personally would want when I was 22, 23, whatever your age is. If you want to get out of your job or you want more freedom, that's what I would have wanted to see. And that's kind of what led me to that path, is to stay on that. And now I have a full land investing firm up in Cincinnati, Ohio, with salesmen, transaction coordinators, all that stuff. And I'm passionate about it. And I think it provides so much value to the landowners who want to sell and the buyers who were looking for that 5 acres to put their house, cabin, hunting land, whatever that is. So I love the value it provides. And I also think it's a great investment path for newer investors that are wanting to make a full-time living off of it.
I love it. I love it, Dan. That's great advice and great stuff today. Listen, if our audience wanted to reach out to you, learn more about it, whether it's active investing or passive investing in land or joining your team, where can they do that?
So the best way to reach me is my Instagram. It's Instagram.com/Daniel Apke. Just type in Daniel Apke, APKE, or just go to landinvestingonline.com. That's where you can learn about land investing. We have so many free resources. I'm not here to sell you guys anything. We provide free YouTube, free resources, podcasts, all that stuff. There's so much value you can get, see if it's right for you. But at the end of the day, if the traditional real estate methods are a little much for you guys, I think this is a great alternative for you guys to look at, just because there's so much less upfront cost and capital and work needed.
Yeah, less upfront costs, less upfront capital, no tenants, no toilets, and disposable land that the seller is not married to, right? They're not married
Exactly.
to living there. They didn't live in the house. They didn't, raise their kids there, or husband pass away or get divorced.
Exactly.
All the emotions that get tied to houses. Very rarely does that happen with land. So Daniel, listen, thanks a lot for carving out some time for us today on Accelerated Investor.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
Well, there you have it. I certainly enjoyed talking to Dan about my specific case studies. My buddy with the apple orchard, the 40 acres behind my house that I want, and the infill land that I own. Definitely all land, and different ways to make money with land, especially for those of you that are looking to get in with little or none of your own money. I also encourage all of you to check out Dan's website, Land Investing Online. If you're interested in being an investor in land, a private lender, or actively investing in land, check that out. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating and a review. Open up your phone right now and go ahead into Spotify or Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and hit the like button. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you'd never miss another episode of Accelerated Investor.
You were just listening to the Accelerated Investor Podcast with Josh Cantwell. If you enjoyed this episode and learned something new, help us build the AI community by leaving a review and 5-star rating on our iTunes podcast channel. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another episode. To see passive investing opportunities, visit freelandventures.com/passive. To start your journey toward the lifestyle you've always dreamed of with multifamily apartments, apply for one-on-one coaching with Josh at www.joshcantwellcoaching.com.